Hello and welcome to this Chess Secrets video. And if I get enough positive feedback on this video, I will do more of these. So let's get back to Chess Secrets here. There's much chess knowledge that may seem like a secret to a beginner or somebody learning chess. Knowledge that is not so secret to chess masters, of course, but things that when you learn them, it astounds you that you haven't learned it before, and they can really help your game. So in this video, I will cover pattern recognition, which is an invaluable tool to help improve your game. So in chess, there are many patterns, and the more of these that you can become familiar with and be able to see in your games, the faster you will be able to make better moves. You'll be able to calculate and steer the game into positions that will be favorable for you. So this position here, take a look at it, see what you think. If you can solve this, it is white's turn to move in this position, and white has a winning combination here. So before I give you this answer, which I will go through this position here towards the end of the video, because first I would like to cover some issues when it comes to pattern recognition. So I will go back to this game at the end, so stick around for that. But before that, let's look at a simple example here that involves pattern recognition. So white to move here. What is the best move? This is a fairly basic tactical problem here. So if we look at the evaluation and the lines, white to move wins here. So rook to e8, of course, with a back rank checkmate. So in pattern recognition, you don't need to memorize all the different pieces on the board, but this little pattern here of 3 pawns in front of a king and an unguarded back rank and no escape hatch has been created for the king. So if we look at white's side of the board, this pawn, the h pawn, is pushed forward, leaving a little escape hatch. So if the black rook checked here, the king would escape and not be mated. But that is not so for black in this position, where the rook checks and mates him on the back rank because no escape hatch has been created and the rook is no longer defending this back rank. And once you learn these basic simple patterns, you can use them in more complicated combinations, and you can steer the game into those simple checkmate patterns. All right, so let's look at another example. I'll turn off the lines, and that way you can try and figure out what the best move is. So using that previous pattern, now that you are familiar with that, it will help you in solving this problem. So once again, white to move here. And white is ahead in material, of course, with this extra queen. But what is the best combination here for white to win? Okay, so pause if you need to think about it more. If not, let's look at the answer. The queen sacrifices here with check, and that forces a capture by the bishop. But now rook to e8, and we see that checkmate pattern once again here. And so after you're familiar with this pattern, we can use that to set it up in different combinations. So once again, no escape hatch for the king, and the back rank is not protected, even though it seemed to be protected when we go back here and look at this initial position. Even though the rook was protecting, we were able to knock it out with the queen and then perform that pattern. All right, on to the next one. Let me turn off the lines and evaluations. Okay. All right, so this is a very similar pattern to the last one, just a few slight changes. Now there are only 2 pawns, but the king is in the corner. So once again, a back rank mate is possible here. So fairly easy once you're aware of the patterns with this back rank checkmate. So no escape hatch, no protection of the back rank, and the rook mates. So now we can use that pattern to go on to something a little more complicated. All right, so here, something to remember with these patterns. It is black's turn to move here. Now we see the position has been flipped. So if you just remember the basic pattern and the pieces involved, remember that the position can be flipped or that pattern can occur in different positions on the board. So here we see if it was white's turn to move, another mating pattern comes up of pawn on f6 and the queen mating on g7. So if it was white's turn to move, white would win with queen to g7. But with black to move, how does he win here? All right, let's look at the answer. So a mate in 2, sacrificing the queen, forcing this rook to capture, and a recapture with mate on the back rank. And so we see that same mating pattern of 2 pawns, the king in the corner, and the rook mating here. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Oh, let me turn off the evaluation and lines. Okay. All right, so now another pattern, and it was similar to the last one. It is white's turn to move here. Once again, if it was black's turn, he would have the win with queen to b2 mate using the pawn and queen combination here. Or another mating pattern of just bringing this rook down here and checking. The queen could block, but then the rook would capture. So luckily it's white's turn to move, and a simple checkmate by the queen here for white. So queen to f8. And the pattern to recognize in this position is once again 2 pawns here, but in this position, if it was a rook to check, the king could escape here to g7. So instead a queen is used, which checks the king and cuts off any escape to g7. So another pattern to recognize. And now we will look at this same checkmating pattern, but in a combination. All right. Okay, so once again, we see the rook here, which can possibly check. So that should give you a hint. And another mating pattern for black is the double rooks lined up with the pawn and delivering a mate here on a1. So if it were black's turn to move, he would have this checkmating pattern right here. But it is white to move. So let's check out the answer. All right, a mate in 2 with the rook here. Check, bishop captures, and now that checkmating pattern once again of the queen trapping the king in the corner, cutting off any escape to g7 here. Okay, on to the next one. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so white to move here. And if we look at this position, if it were black's move, once again, black has another checkmating pattern of the bishop down aiming down through this diagonal and covering G2 and H1, allowing the knight to jump in with a mate here. But it is white's turn to move in this position. White could just grab material by capturing this knight and go on to win, but there is a better move. All right, that move is a mate in 1 with rook to d8. So another checkmating pattern to recall and remember here. We see that the pawns are blocking black's escape and the rook is protected by a knight here. So another little pattern to try and add to your knowledge bank to improve your chess. All right, now let's look at this version or this pattern in a little more complicated form. All right, so in this position, once again, if it were black's turn to move, black would have a mate with the queen on G2, but it is white's turn and he must act immediately to prevent a mate here on G2. So he has to perform forcing moves with check that force the king to react to those moves and not allow black to jump in with this queen to G2 mate. All right. The pattern that we saw before was this D1 rook, if it would be able to move up here to D8 with mate. So that's not possible because the bishop is blocking, but the answer is to get that bishop to move with rook to E8 check, sacrificing the rook. Black is forced to capture, and now the pattern emerges here with rook to D8 mate. Okay, on to the next example here. Okay, so in this position, black is trying to attack here on white's second rank and has a possible check here, capturing this pawn, but it is white's turn to move, and there's a simple checkmating pattern here. Another one that you should try and remember as it can occur often. So rook to H8 here. So once again, we see the bishop lined up on a long diagonal, but now the bishop is working with this rook to mate here and cut off any escape, and this pawn prevents the king from escaping. Okay, now we will be slowly working up to that position that you first saw in this video until we get to the answer. So next, we will look at this position here. So this may look familiar as it was the same position or almost the same position as the first example, the first problem at the beginning of this video. So here, what does white do? How does white win in this position? Well, if you remember the pattern that we just looked at, it's a mate in 1 here with rook to H8, trapping the king with the bishop and the rook. Okay, now that you have this pattern stored in your memory, it should make it easier for you to solve the following problems here. Okay, now once again, the same position, but further back in the combination. So how does white win in 2 moves here? Pause if you need to look at it further. If not, let's look at the answer. So now we have rook to H5, possible because this bishop is pinning the pawn to the king, so the pawn cannot capture this rook. And this bishop is firing up the diagonal, forcing the king to move to the only square available here, and mate, the same pattern. All right, now we'll go back a little further. Okay, And now, how do we continue in this position? All right, white's turn to move here. So, let's look at the evaluation. White's winning, of course. And we begin with a queen sacrifice, a forcing move. And the only option is for black to capture here. And now we arrive back at the previous position. Rook check because of this pin of the pawn by the bishop. The king is forced to move and mate. Okay, so now the final example, we'll go back to that very first problem, and you should be able to solve it now that you know the patterns involved. All right. Okay, here is the problem that was at the beginning of the video. So what do you do here? White is winning. It's white's turn to move. How do you set up the winning combination? All right, pause if you need more time. If not, here we go. Okay, we see here knight to e7 check. Now, if the king were to just move, we have an immediate mate with queen captures on f8 here. But in this position, the queen can capture this knight. But now we continue the combination. Queen sacrifice, king captures, rook checks, king retreats, and mate. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video on a chess secret, which was pattern recognition, which, it's not quite a secret for chess masters, but for beginners or people improving, it can seem like a secret. And then once you start learning these patterns, it will definitely help improve your game. And you'll be able to slowly improve on your combinational ability by seeing more and more of these patterns. All right, well, if you stuck around for this entire video, I thank you. Please leave comments or suggestions and like this video if you want to see more of these chess secret videos. And remember to subscribe to my Nick Butts Chess channel where you can enjoy more chess videos. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.